Okay, I'm seeing lots of people still coming in on this, but since we said we would start at 11, I will start talking now. So, good morning to all of you. Welcome to this second webinar of the three-part series that the Secretariat of the Global Research Alliance is organizing with the support from the New Zealand Ministry for Primary Industries. This particular session, we're going to be looking at creating impact through collaboration. And what we will have is presentations from the four networks that are active as part of the GRA. And they will be talking about their activities. They will be talking about what they're planning to do, what they're currently doing. But they will also be talking about how you maybe want to think about joining in these activities, how your country can participate in that, and thinking maybe a little bit about the opportunities that are there. For those of you who don't know me, I'm Jeroen Dijkman. I'm the Director for the International Portfolio of the New Zealand Agriculture Greenhouse Gas Research Centre, and I will be chairing this to the best of my capacity. Now, obviously, we want this session to be as interactive as possible, and we will be recording the session as well, and it will be later available on the GRA website should you want to watch it again, or maybe listen to some of the presentations that will be made in this again. Now, as I said, there will be 4 presentations from the different networks in the GRA, and then after that we'll have a session of questions and answers once all these presentations have been made. Now you can submit your questions with the question and answer option that is on your screen on Zoom. And you can just post them there as we go through this all. And then if you particularly like a question, you can upvote it, and then we can see that this is a particular popular question. That means that I will be able to ask those. Now also, if you have a question that we don't manage to answer during the course of the webinar, don't panic. We will make sure that those questions are answered, and they will also be made available on the GRA website later. So, without further ado, I am going to introduce our first speaker. And our first speaker is Laure. And Laure is a researcher in agroecology at the Senegalese Institute of Research and Agriculture. She was appointed head of the National Lab on Plant Production of ISRA, and she has been in that post for more than a year now. And as part of her work, Laure studies the adaptation potential of agrosystems to climate change and the impact of agriculture practices on the efficiency of nutrient cycling in West African crop systems. Laure represents Senegal as the co-chair of the Paddy Rice Research Group. So Laure, we're looking forward to hearing from you. I'm sure all the participants are. And let me remind the participants, if you have questions for Laure, post them and we will ask them to her later. Laure, the web floor is yours.
Thank you. I will try to share my screen for you to see my presentation. Give me just 1 minute. I would like to thank you for this invitation to present on this webinar. I'm very glad to be part of it. And I will present you on behalf of my 2 other co-chairs, Yas from Japan and Alvaro from Uruguay, some of the activities and projects that are undertaken by the Paddy Rice Research Group of the GRA. First, I will introduce you to the GRA community, even though most of you know the community more than me, for sure. We are more than 62 members country now, and more partner organization. And for the Paddy Rice Research Group, we feel a need to expand this community. This would be good to expand it to better understand GHG emission in the different rice systems worldwide. We see, for example, a necessity to engage more countries from Africa. As you can see, there is a lot of a country in white here in Africa and also in South Asia. For the moment, the Asia subgroup in the Paddy Rice Research Group is the more active with regular meeting. As you can see, we had a meeting in 2008, another one in 2009, and for 2020, as you all know, it will be difficult to meet in person. There is also, even though the Asia subgroup is the more active, we see a very strong link with the America subgroup. As you can see, there's a joint project funded by APEC on capacity building on management technologies for climate smart rice cultivation in the Southeast Asian and Latin America rice sector. Different workshops has been organized through this project. It's not only capacity building that is going on in the Paddy Rice Research Group. There's also important research project that we can call flagship project, like the MIRSA 3 project that was launched in 2018. This project is looking at developing multi-beneficial integrated rice cropping techniques that will improve rice cultivation in Southeast Asia for low emission and stable productivity. This project focused on alternate wetting and drying techniques that were developed in the MIRSA 2 project, but also fertilization and rice cultivars. This type of initiative have led to the publication of guidelines. For example, this one, the guideline for measuring CH4 and N2O emissions from rice paddies. And this guideline is now introduced in the IPCC guidelines for national greenhouse gas inventories. So this is quite an achievement. There are other projects going on in this Paddy Rice group. For example, the Fontagro project. I think Fontagro was discussed in the first webinar. This project will improve adoption of alternate wetting and drying techniques by farmers in South America. There is also a Cliff Grad scholarship on identifying high-yielding rice cultivars, but with low methane emissions. And there's also a UIUC project on the use of the sustainable rice platform. So there's a lot of things going on, mostly in the Asia subgroup and in link with the America subgroup. What we'd like to do, and that's why I was proposed to talk during this webinar, is to get more membership from African countries. We would like to set up an Africa subgroup and develop flagship project with the African countries, and why not have scholarships developed in the African countries on African research questions on Paddy Rice. I think that that was all for me. Thank you for your attention, and I am available if you have questions. Thank you.
Thank you very much, Laure, for your presentation. to the participants, so Laura asked a very specific question to you as well, and I don't see any questions yet on the question and answer board, but if you have questions to Laura, or if you're from Africa and you have proposals to make to Laura on how you could maybe join the Paddy Rice Research Group, and specifically the Africa subgroup, then clearly we'd like to hear from you. So keep your questions coming. We're collecting them all on the question and answer board, and we will get to that once we have gone through the various presentations. Now, I'm looking at my list of panelists, and it appears that some of our panelists are still not on board. And so what I would like to do is to go a bit off schedule here, and go to the Livestock Research Group. Now the Livestock Research Group actually has 3 co-chairs, and I'm one of them. But I won't be the one presenting on this, but I will be listening myself to Richard Dewhurst, who will take the floor now, and maybe afterwards I'll make a few additional comments on what the LRG is doing and how the opportunities for this to join and to join in are. So Richard, the floor is yours.
Okay, thank you very much. As Jeroen mentioned, I'm a relatively new co-chair for the Livestock Research Group based in Scotland in the UK. Having previously worked in New Zealand and in Ireland, I've obviously done a tour of the countries that the current co-chairs are based in. We have co-chairs in New Zealand, in Ireland, and in the UK. I'm going to take a slightly different approach and give you some UK perspectives on progressing partnerships in 3 areas, really, the kind of areas I see as potential collaborative project areas to develop in the livestock area. A little bit about funding opportunities that I see coming from a UK angle, and then just to mention some potential partner organisations again from a UK perspective. So then, in terms of potential project areas, my own interests are particularly around indirect opportunities to improve technical efficiency of animal production and thereby reduce greenhouse gas emissions intensity and at the same time improve the resilience of the system. So areas like animal health, mortality, morbidity, longevity, feed efficiency, and the way in which those impact on emissions intensity. In the animal health and greenhouse gas emissions area, and whether we're talking about infectious disease or metabolic disease, one of the key issues I think that's common around the world is data sources. And if you have access to data around disease incidences, effects on animal performance, disease treatments and their effects on animal performance, then I can see that coming together in a common program. Another area that's a common interest that's relevant to greenhouse gas emissions intensity is the whole area of feed efficiency. Different countries making great progress in breeding for feed efficiency, in proxies for feed conversion efficiency, and I see potential for bringing that together in a unified program. A third area to mention then is feed evaluation and feed utilization. I think the basic principles of upgrading and evaluating and correctly using feeds is central to efficiency, but also greenhouse gas emissions, whether we're talking about intensive dairy production in developed countries or we're talking about very extensive animal production systems. And I think we can learn a lot from each other by working on feed evaluation together. And lastly, just to flag that UK has great interest in helping with capacity building around the world, using our expertise to help in building programs around the world. Just to mention a little bit on funding opportunities. Obviously, if we're going to work together, we need to know about funding opportunities and potential partners. The UK has its Global Challenges Research Fund. It's a large fund for UK partners to work with international colleagues, particularly in developing countries. If you're a researcher, then there are opportunities currently open. For example, the Agritech Catalyst is looking for proposals for projects in the agri-tech and food chain innovation area in Africa. The Newton Fund is a fund that funds collaborative research and innovation, particularly looking at establishing collaborations and developing consortia, currently working in 17 partner countries. But I guess if you're a government or a funding agency, the opportunities are to look to link with the Global Challenges Research Fund and perhaps develop new program initiatives in that kind of area. In terms of potential partners, just to mention some examples from a UK perspective, the Centre for Tropical Livestock Genetics and Health, based in Edinburgh, around the Roslin Institute and SIUC, working very closely with ILRI, is very strong in the area of tropical livestock genetics and health, and always looking for opportunities to collaborate and link with people with interests in animal breeding and animal health in the tropical regions. And lastly, just to mention another group of organisations that have been set up in the UK to include working internationally. The UK Agritech Centres, 4 relatively new organisations. The ones that are most relevant to livestock are CL, the Centre for Innovation Excellence in Livestock, and Agri Epicentre, which works in precision farming. But there's also a new centre in big data, and with crop interests on the call, there's a Crop Health and Protection Centre. These are centres UK government has set up with a commercial focus, but operating internationally. And again, many of them have projects and are being encouraged to have projects in many other countries, in China, in Africa, and South America. So there are opportunities for funded collaborations with those. Thank you very much.
Thank you very much, Richard. So Richard presented the LRG approach very much from a UK perspective. Let me just say a few words on where the LRG is now, and let me also make a little bit of a pitch for the upcoming annual meeting of the Livestock Research Group. The Livestock Research Group will be having its annual meeting online, of course, on 18 and 19 September, two-hour sessions on 1 2-hour session on each of the days. And we'll be also having a bespoke website where you can watch and look at your leisure at the various presentations of the different networks that are working on issues related to feeding, mitigation research related to genetics and rumen and feeding management, but also we will also be talking about other activities that we are involved in, such as providing support and capacity building to countries to be able to upgrade their greenhouse gas inventories and to upgrade the capability in MRV in particular with respect to enhancing the ambition of livestock in their NDCs. Another activity that we're quite busy with at the moment within the LRG in a number of the countries, and probably people who are online at the moment are participating in that, is a large study where we're looking at the role of livestock in sustainable agri-food systems. and particularly looking at current situations and how this will evolve in the future. And that is really a multidimensional look at the role of livestock that's trying to balance both its impact on climate change, but also its contribution, of course, to many of the livelihood, economic, and other outcomes that livestock contributes to. So now I've seen some of the questions coming in for Laure. I hope you're also posting your questions for Richard, so we can come back to Richard later on when we get to our discussion. I have to have a quick check on who is online now. Rich Eckhart. Sorry, I don't think Jean-Francois Susanne has made it online, so I'm going to ask Rich Eckard to make a little presentation on the Croplands Research Group, if that's okay. Now, Richard is a professor and director of the Primary Industry Climate Change Centre at the University of Melbourne, and his research focuses on sustainable livestock production, with a recent focus on carbon farming, managing extreme climate events, and options for agriculture to respond to a changing climate. He is also a co-leader of the GRA Integrated Research Group, Inventories and NDC Network. And Rich, it's great that you're able to jump in at no notice, and so we're looking forward to hearing from you. The web floor is yours.
Great, thanks, Jeroen. I presume you can hear me? Yep, good.
We can indeed, and we can see your slides.
Great, thank you. So this is a presentation, good evening everyone, on behalf of Jean-Francois Susanne, Beverly Henry, the Australian representative, Pamela Yusey, the Canadian representative. I used to be the Australian representative on the Integrative Research Group, but as Jeroen says, I am coordinating the Inventories and NDCs network. So the Integrative Research Group has three main networks within it. Farm to Regional Scale Integration Network. So that's about modeling and scaling models up from farm scale through to regional scale. Very much linked into what we call the Inventories and NDC network that I'll explain in a moment, and then the Soil Carbon Sequestration Network. Now, just a few points about each of them. The Farm and Regional Scale Integration Network, this was one that I helped found originally, and then moved from that to another network. It's aiming to develop more generic and robust methods for assessing the balance between greenhouse gas emissions and removals in agriculture, and to test best practices at farm through to regional scale. So it's about modeling at scales, modeling at farm scale, modeling through to regional scale of the balance between productivity and greenhouse gas emissions. So some of the objectives is providing coordination, increased opportunities for international collaboration in all these scales of modeling. So for example, one of the activities we organized at the International Greenhouse Gas and Animal Agriculture Conference in Brazil recently is we had a modeling workshop where we brought all the farm systems modelers together and shared approaches, shared case studies, shared approaches we've taken to greenhouse gas emissions modeling. It's also about providing opportunities for upskilling network members in modeling and appropriate use of models. In many cases, funding doesn't allow us to do broad scale systems type research in the field, and so modeling becomes a very important component of this. We always also organize workshops associated with major conference events. As I mentioned, the Greenhouse Gas and Animal Agriculture modeling workshop that we had, where we allow modelers to meet, cross-train in new models, seek internal review on our processes, exchange ideas. So that's what we did at the last GGA conference, and we plan to do more of that. And then obviously contribute to capacity building, which allows us to build a bridge between local and global mitigation policy design. So if you are someone who's interested in farm systems modeling, in regional scale modeling, in trying to take your field research and saying what it means in a broader context of regional scale, this network can help you. The Inventories and NDC network, that's one that I coordinate with a number of others. We aim to provide the evidence base and to better connect governments and relative expertise to subsequently improve the quality of the agriculturally nationally determined contributions. So these are the nationally determined contributions to the Paris Agreement. So various countries made commitments, including agriculture, and by way of their achievements are reflected in the national inventories. So we focus on not just improving agricultural greenhouse gas inventories, but on how mitigation options, mitigation strategies are captured in those inventories. And so it's all about greenhouse gas accounting, really, and about identifying how to capture mitigation opportunities. So some of the work we've been doing under that is providing increased access to methods to improve the collection of activity data. If you don't know how many livestock you have in a country, what are the surrogate measures you can use in how to develop a database of the likely activity data of livestock in a country, for example, or nitrogen fertilizer use. So it's assisting various countries with inventory development, with inventory structure, specific guidance on the development of moving from tier 1 to tier 2 type greenhouse gas inventories, providing technical support and skills training, capacity building, so targeted training in how inventories work and how national activity data can be captured. And then there's a component of building shared databases. There's a number of emerging databases around the world that can be used to underpin greenhouse gas inventories in various countries. So you're not alone. You might say, I don't have any data. Well, there's emerging databases around the world that can actually help you and provide surrogate measures that you could use to develop your own in-country inventory. And finally, capturing agricultural mitigation in the inventory. So how do we adjust our inventories to capture activity that might be part of our nationally determined contribution to the Paris Agreement? And finally, the soil carbon sequestration network. This is linked to the 4 per mil initiative and the chasms network. So it's linked into sort of big internationally funded projects. So the network provides some coordination around that. So it's about estimating soil carbon sequestration potential across various scales, temporal and spatial scales, aiming to come up with reliable, low-cost monitoring and verification methods. So can we move from the expensive in situ soil carbon measurements through to modeling approaches that might be linked to satellite remote sensing methods of measuring and verifying soil carbon change? Understanding the trade-off and synergies between greenhouse gas emissions and soil carbon sequestration. So are we just increasing nitrous oxide emissions as a result of building more soil carbon? So we need to be careful about that. Understanding the co-benefits, and there are plenty of co-benefits of building soil carbon and soil health. And then producing best practices guides on monitoring soil organic carbon stocks over space and time. So that's a snapshot of the Integrative Research Group and our activities and what the 3 networks are aiming to do. Jeroen, handing back to you.
Thanks very much, Richard. Please, for those of you online participants, post your questions to Richard as well. Okay, so we were supposed to have a presentation on the Cropland Research Group as well, but unfortunately, the person who was going to make this presentation has had a family emergency, so we won't be listening to her. So what I suggest is that we move on to the various questions that you have answered. I see some of the questions have already been answered whilst the people were still talking. But Laure, I'm going to go to you first with a couple of questions. And I have a person from Cameroon here who says he is a young researcher and he would like to be part of the African research group within the Paddy Rice Research Group. And he's wondering how he could become part of it. What are the criteria? How can people join your Africa Research Group? Laure, can you give us some
I didn't answer directly to this question because I had to check with my colleague to see what were exactly the criteria to be part of the of this research group. I was thinking that it was country members that were priority in this group, but this is not correct. Every researcher can be member of the group if they have something to share. So if you are interested in this group, you just have to contact and give your
Okay, so Laura, if we understand it correctly, if people are interested in joining the group and becoming part of the Africa Paddy Rice research group, they just have to drop you an email, tell you what you're working about, share and they can start a dialogue with you on how to progress this. Okay.
Exactly.
That's very clear.
Exactly.
Thanks very much.
Thank you for translating.
No. That's the job of the chair, isn't it?
Yeah, that's true.
Richard, Richard, I'm.
That is which Richard?
Ask, oh, sorry. Yeah, Richard, you're Rich.
Richard D.
Richard D. Okay. So here's a question for you, Richard, from the floor, and this is from a person who is a member of the Livestock Research Group, and he's looking at, okay, so there's lots of research ongoing, but how can we progress, or what are your proposals to progress effective partnership and collaboration with researchers and research organizations in other continents? And he's particularly, or he or she is particularly asking the question about how to progress that in Africa.
Yeah, I think there's two sides to that question. What I tried to do in my presentation was to emphasize some of the UK funding opportunities through our Global Challenges Research Fund. So there are within that opportunities to build collaborative networks through the Newton Fund, and in some areas, for example, in Africa, generally in this area, but technology and agri-food, there are opportunities through the Agritech Catalyst for co-funded projects that have activity in the UK and activity in Africa, and academic and industry partners in both locations. Within the Global Research Alliance, obviously there are opportunities that come up over time for other funding mechanisms. For example, the Cliff Grads scheme has already been mentioned in relation to postgraduate students gaining experience in different partner countries. And I think that the aspiration is to look for any opportunities for countries to work together and to bring their collective resources together to address common challenges. I gave the Global Challenges Research Fund as an example of a stream of funding that is out there, but I guess in many countries there are similar opportunities and similar desires to work on joint programs, to bring funding programs together.
Thanks, Richard. If I'll add a few words to that as well. So I think as in all the research group, also the Livestock Research Group, what it's really looking at is linking sort of global science on livestock mitigation research. At the same time as we're sort of trying to do that linking, obviously also very aware that there's different capabilities and capacities around the world. So it's also about using that science and the various resources that there are to build capacity in other countries. Now in Africa, the LRG has been quite engaged in building capacity, particularly on the MRV side, and we're continuing to do that. We also have activities there where we're looking at collecting and understanding the types of livestock activity data and the various processes that are being used in the countries to update greenhouse gas inventories, who is responsible, so that we can engage much more effectively in different countries, and also target our capacity building within different regions, and using also local champions to be able to do that. And there we're also not just looking at Africa as a whole. Of course, we understand that this situation is very different in different parts of Africa, and so we're approaching that very much in a sub-regional manner. There's also activities going on related to modeling work and using that to estimate livestock sector emissions in different countries, but also to look at the ability to identify mitigation scenario activities and how those could be implemented. But there's a whole range of additional activities going on there, which have both their science and the research side, but also very much the capacity and the capability building side. And again, if you join us on the 18th and 19th of September and look at the various presentations that will be online, you'll be able to get a much better idea of how we're approaching all this and what the opportunities are for engagement with the LRG. But I now want to go to a question for Rich. That's Richard Eckard. And so, Richard, here's a question. What are the opportunities for capacity building through your the subgroup that you are leading on NDCs and MRV, or sorry, what is it called? Inventories and NDC network.
So firstly, I would suggest engage in the Global Research Alliance. There's a question in the chat about do you have to be a country member to engage in a network? And I would say no. Even if your country is not officially a member, there's no reason why you can't engage in a network. And the whole idea of the networks is to connect people into broader networks than themselves, to connect people into others working around the world on inventories and NDCs. So I see there was a question from Mwambulana in Zambia about capacity building in greenhouse emissions from livestock. And for example, we're busy developing a joint project with New Zealand, Australia, to work in a number of countries on identifying nationally determined contributions, mitigation from Africa, from agriculture, and then as part of that, looking at how those emissions can be quantified in an inventory development. So the person from Zambia, watch this space. We should be able to have a joint project that you could tap into over the next 4 years and be part of in terms of inventory methods, accounting methods, mitigation opportunities from livestock production systems. So watch this space, keep in touch with the network.
Thanks very much, Richard. Okay, I'm looking at some of the questions here. Richard Dewhurst. Okay, there's a question here from Nina Grasnik, and she's asking, is there an idea to also create regional subgroups of the Livestock Research Group, like similar to the ones that Laure was discussing, where they are wanting to set up an Africa rice paddy group? And her second part of the question is if you have any specific activity plans by the Livestock Research Group for next year, and where you look for further researchers to be actively involved. Richard Dewhurst?
Yeah, so in relation to the regional question, I'm pretty new in this co-chair role. I've not been involved in any discussions about that. I think the preference would be for the definition of project areas. That, I mean, it may be that there is a project in a grouping of countries that relate to a particular region. If, you know, if it's feed evaluation and feed improvement in sub-Saharan Africa, for example, that might be a natural grouping that would come together. But I think that would be driven by the project interest rather than just setting up a regional group to do that. In terms of areas that I'd like to see developing, I think, you know, I've already listed the areas around feed evaluation, around I mean, the broader interests of the Livestock Research Group, bringing together some of the genetics and genomic and rumen genomics interests that sit behind feed conversion efficiency, where I think there's a lot of variation out there. And the animal health area is another area where I think, you know, things have stalled a little bit in terms of the activity of that group. I think if we could get a group of people together interested in finding creative ways of accessing data about issues of animal health, of treatments and effects on productivity and emissions, I think that, you know, there are common interests in clever ways of sourcing data and modeling data that run across you know, intensive systems in developed countries that have very highly developed veterinary recording and diagnostics and epidemiological systems, through to developing countries where there are probably some other creative ways of doing things, but also similar lack of data on what I see as a big issue.
Thanks, Richard. Just to add to that, on the regional subgroups, now that has been part of the discussion in the past year, and you know, clearly, like Richard saying, there's quite a number of activities that are region specific, and also in our programming, we obviously, there's understanding that although many of the problems are similar, there's also quite significant differences between different regions, and we're trying to address that by making sure that we have that we address those problems as well. Again, what normally happens is that at the annual meeting of the Livestock Research Group, priorities for the coming year are identified, you know, and also based, of course, on the results that have been obtained and the activities that have been implemented over the past year. So, if you wish to join in that specific conversation, come and join us at the annual meeting on the 18th and 19th of September. Right. Okay. Now right. I'm looking at the and okay. Given that we're talking here about progressing partnership, I'm going to ask Rich Eckard, maybe you to have a step at this particular question. And this is a question that is about, okay, so it seems to be that lots of the funding is actually bilateral project funding, and quite often funding, you know, from countries is very much specifically directed towards one or two countries. You know, what do you see in terms of possibility of making that into multi-country projects, and are there any particular challenges that you see related to that, and how we may want to think about solving those?
Yeah, thanks, Jeroen. Look, that's always a challenge, but I would say if you if you engage in the network, if you engage in the Global Research Alliance, and make connections with these networks. I'll give you an example. We're currently developing 3 new projects that work across multiple governments linked to the Global Research Alliance. So these are joint New Zealand, Australian investments that'll go into a number of countries looking at greenhouse gas inventories. How do we account for livestock emissions? And some of them are in East Africa, for example. And so there's always opportunity that if you are part of a government research organization in a target country or part of the CG network or one of those, that we can include you in that in one or another way, either directly as a country or as a partner in that country. So, for example, we might actually focus on one particular country, but it doesn't mean to say that the countries around it can't benefit, because the inventories and livestock emissions calculations we might come up with and the data sets we develop in one country could quite easily be applicable to the neighboring countries as well in terms of a data set. So I'd say engagement through your employment organization is probably the most important.
Yes, thanks, Richard. I think that's right, and I think definitely all of the activities that the GRA is involved in, there's access for everyone has access to that, and also we're actively looking, not necessarily so getting funding from countries, but to link ongoing activities rather than where of course we can make a lot of progress. And part of the work that we are from the NZA DRC are involved in, for example, is also looking at using the various bits of local data that are available in Africa, in different regions of Africa, to see whether we can use those to establish locally or regionally specific emission factors. And again, with a view to actually progressing tiers, particularly within the livestock sector. Now, there's also a question here, and I think I'll try and answer that. Is that obviously lack of data on greenhouse gases is not only tied to lack of human capacity, and that's true. I mean, there is also lots of infrastructure or institutional setup that may be lacking in a number of countries. And again, the GRA is looking at not only building that institutional capacity and linking the different ministries, but is also looking at investing in regional measurements hubs, particularly in Africa, but also in other regions. So again, this is how we're also trying to address the more infrastructural problems that may be related to this. Okay, Laura, I've been looking for a question for you specifically, but you have answered all of them already by typing the answers. But Laura, is there anything you would like to add to the discussions, and maybe give your view on some of the questions that are asked from the Paddy Rice Research Group, also around capacity building, about joint programming and joint projects, and using bilateral funding for multi-country projects?
Exactly. Yes, there is a lot of opportunity of funding for early career researcher, African early career researcher. And I've realized that most of these opportunities are not used by my colleagues. So it's a call for them to look at the opportunity and get in touch, because we are really looking for PhDs and researchers that are interested in this research thematic, and it is lacking. The second part is flagship project. I've been chair of the Paddy Rice Research Group for a year now, and even though there's some meetings and stuff like that, it is all meetings done with the big group. There's no initiative coming from African countries. So I am very happy to see that some of the participants are willing to work together, and I have shared my emails, and I am open to getting in touch and trying to build something from this meeting. There is a huge need for research and data, more measured GHG emission in African rice system. The few data that we have seems to point out that emissions are lower in African systems than in Asian or American systems. So we need to clear this question, and as someone have written, there is a load of funding opportunity. We just have to send our proposal to this funding.
Yeah.
So
Thanks.
if you can translate in a better English, that would be great.
No. It was I couldn't say it any better than that, Laure. Honestly, no, and that's great, and it's good to see. Yes, there seems to be a lot of enthusiasm, and I also think you know, it is not just about the co-chairs, of course, thinking about what is required. If you, as participants, as countries, feel that you want to set up a separate cluster that looks at a specific problem that is specific to your region of the world or to your sets of countries, then that's great. And I think the Secretariat and all of us will be very happy to facilitate that and to support you in that. And there's clearly, a lot of it can be coming from us, but it's even better. And I think also if we look at funding opportunities, if it comes from within the countries, of course, and from that works even better. I also wanted to add a little on. Obviously, you all know about the various awards and Learn and NSET grads, the various opportunities there are to obtain awards, to do specific studies in this mitigation area. Now, clearly, with the current pandemic, travel related to that is becoming a bit complicated. But we're also trying to make amends by that, at least in terms of the sort of broader capacity building in countries and specific capacity building around MRV and NDCs by developing a number of web modules or e-learning modules that will become available within the first half of next year as well. So, I mean, there's a number of opportunities, a number of different initiatives that are being taken to take care of it. And of course, any ideas that you have, we're very open to them. You all know the Secretariat's email address or our email addresses, which I'm sure will be put in the report of today, so that we can continue the conversation. And then I encourage all of you, of course, as well to join in the more network-specific meetings that there will be throughout the year. Then we have one more look at the list of questions. As I said, if your question was not answered during the live session, we have collected them, and we will be providing you with an answer in the write-up. But I think most of these questions have been answered. If you have questions or suggestions after you disconnect from this webinar, then please also come back to us, and we will try and answer that in the best possible manner. Okay. Well, I think we only have an hour, and we're coming to the end of that hour. and I still see participation is high. We're still hovering around the 50, so that's great. First of all, I'd like to thank all our panelists for their presentations, particularly Richard Eckard for doing this with no notice. So well done, Richard. And I think we've all learned a lot. So as I said, the actual webinar will be posted on the GRA website, and it will be there also with all your questions and the various answers that were given to it. And this was number 2 in a series of 3 webinars. So there will be another webinar which is sometime towards the end of September, and you will receive the appropriate communications about that. I think we've heard a lot about the activities, and I think we've also heard a lot about what is going on and the various opportunities that there are. And I think also to echo what Laure was saying, I mean, to a large extent, there are opportunities, but of course we have to combine, to join our forces in identifying where we want to work and how we want to work on that. And clearly there is lots of support there. But I mean, one thing is clear, there are clear opportunities to link our science efforts and to build that capacity. And by doing that, will also provide us with better opportunities for funding and for better opportunities to actually address and progress the various questions related to UNFCCC reporting, but also in general to reducing the impact of emissions from agriculture without affecting food production and other outcomes that we're looking for from agriculture. So I encourage you all again to, if your country is not yet part of the GRA, go and lobby and in the various places that you may be able to get to make sure that you join a group. But as Richard said, I mean, participation is obviously not contingent on your country being a member of the GRA, and there's many examples of activities that are going on in countries without that. But I think the GRA is one example of how joining our forces across the continent, joining our common knowledge and how we can complement each other, and by doing that make real progress towards a contribution to the SDGs that the world is looking for, and also addressing one of the gravest challenges that we face in climate change. And as other sectors are addressing their contribution to climate change, obviously the growth and agriculture will become more and more important as a contributor to climate change. But we also know that there's many opportunities to mitigate, whilst at the same time improve food production. So without further ado, I want to thank again all the panelists, Laure, Richard Dewhurst, Richard Eckard. I'd like to thank all the participants for your questions. I'd like to, and your active participation. I'd like to thank the Secretariat for organizing and hosting this. And I wish you all a very pleasant continuation of your morning, afternoon, or evening. And we look forward to your continued participation, not only in this webinar series, but also your active participation in all the networks of the GRA. So thank you, and look forward to seeing you all again. Thank you very much.